Guys, it's Paul once again. This time I'm going to review yet another obscure horror VHS from this time the 70s, I believe, and it's Nocturna. This is a very rare VHS to find, and it's rare for a variety of reasons. One being that fans of disco would definitely want to get this movie. Another reason is that horror VHS collectors definitely want to get this movie, especially under that Meda home entertainment label. Also, it's very rare because the movie has never been re-released ever again. It was only released this one time by Meda or Media Home Entertainment. There's also a release in Canada, I believe, under Astro Video. I haven't seen that release, but that's what IMDb says. I got this for almost 30 bucks on eBay by now, which is an incredible deal, less than half its value. Mine is pretty scuffed up, has some wear to it, but despite that, it's still an incredible deal. The artwork appears to be just the theatrical poster. What a lot of people don't realize is that I think it was always Media Home Entertainment. Under Meda Home Entertainment it says Media Home Entertainment, so I think the company's name when it was under Meda was Meda Media Home Entertainment, that whole long sentence. And at some point, maybe Charles Band had a falling out with his wife because Meda was the name of his wife. It was just dropped and changed to Media Home Entertainment. Maybe it was just easier for business. Now, the film is a very cheesy vampire disco film. I'm sure a lot of you know that. Other VHS collectors have come across this. That's what it is. It's one of a kind. I mean, there was also, I think, a German disco vampire film. But in America, we had this one, Nocturna. And it's a very badly made film, but it's fun. It's certainly a cult classic, a midnight movie madness type of movie. It's fun, it has some cheesy effects, it has cheesy disco music over the whole thing, and although I'm no fan of disco music, not by any means, it's refreshing to hear real music in a movie. I mean, I watch a lot of these low budget obscure slasher films, as you guys know, and a lot of them are just really bad synthesizer type electronic music. But this movie has some pretty decent music, and disco music is very cheesy, it's very nostalgic, so it really makes this film a period piece. It's like a time capsule of the 70s. You've got pure disco music over the entire movie with lots of disco dancing in disco clubs. It makes it a fun time capsule type movie, and I love that kind of stuff. So the disco music to me didn't harm it. For some people who don't like disco music, they can't get past it and they just hate this movie because there's so much disco music in it. But it doesn't bother me. I don't watch these movies and critique them as like this piece of art. I look at these movies from a nostalgic point of view, and from that respect, it's a great fun 70s piece of film. It's not so bad. So the movie begins in Transylvania, and we immediately meet Nocturna, and she's sucking some guy's blood. Then we're in Dracula's castle, and we meet Dracula, and he's pretty hilarious. He's played by John Carradine. He's played in a gazillion movies. He has a lot of funny lines as Dracula. When we first meet him, he goes through this whole spiel of how he turned his castle into a hotel because he needs to pay taxes on his castle. So he turned his castle into a tourist attraction. Meanwhile, there's this guy who works at the castle who's, I guess, a werewolf. His name is Theodore, and he's this really creepy older guy, and he's totally obsessed with Nocturna. He's always talking to himself about how obsessed he is with her.
Am I never going to be her little yum-yum, her schnoozy-poozy, her schnapsy-wapsy? Is she never going to molest me? Is she never going to invade my bed and abuse me carnally? Nocturna, you shall be mine, come hell or holy water.
In fact, there's one scene where he's watching her take this bath, and it's this very long exploitive scene. But bear in mind that the actress who plays Nocturna wrote the story for this. So she wrote the nudity scenes into the script. So it's not like some sleazy director or writer wrote it so that she has to expose her entire body. Just bear that in mind. I thought that was kind of interesting little fact there. But while she's in this whole shower scene, well, it's a bath anyway, he's just watching this whole thing through the crack in the door, and he's just pretty much talking to himself how obsessed he is with her. And he says some of the funniest things, like he says like he's really into loose women like Nocturna because he could pretty much do anything with them. And there's a lot of other funny, silly dialogue. Certainly funny, humorous content. You know that they didn't take this film too seriously with the kind of dialogue that's in it. I mean, you can't really take a disco vampire film seriously anyway, so they had fun with the dialogue, especially with that werewolf guy with the really creepy stalkerish dialogue. They need to book bands and musicians to come to the castle to entertain the guests. She falls in love with this guitarist. They eye each other, and the guitarist just stops playing his guitar, goes over to her, begs her to dance with him, and they start dancing right there. They are the most horrible dancers in a disco film. I mean, if you're going to make a film about disco, you should get some real authentic disco dancers to play in the movie. These guys cannot dance, and it's kind of embarrassing to watch them because I feel like these people are embarrassing themselves trying to dance disco in a film when they totally suck. They're horrible. And at first I thought it was part of the plot. I'm like, is this guy serious? Is she supposed to come in and teach him how to dance? Is it one of those type movies? But no, they're just both horrible dancers, and it's kind of hilarious. And it just adds to the cheesiness, the cheese factor of this movie. So they end up in bed together, as you would imagine, and she realizes that she's in love with him, he's in love with her, and but he's immortal. So of course they have that whole issue. She tells her grandfather that she's running away with him to New York. I don't even know why she would even tell her grandfather. I mean, she should have known that he wouldn't approve of it, but she ends up running away with him, and there she stays with some sort of relative of her family. I think she's like some ex-lover of Dracula. So while she's staying in New York with this relative of the family, she goes to what they call a BSA meeting, which are Bloodsuckers of America. They go there in this old stone little building, I'm not sure what it is, but they're talking about the problems that they have being vampires in New York. It's just silly because there's all kinds of different people there. One of them is a black pimp vampire, and he's pretty funny. He came up with some method of how to snort blood, some of the best blood in the world. I guess it's supposed to look like he's like a drug dealer, but he's selling blood instead. It's kind of funny. But during this little meeting of the vampires, there's this really silly scene where a cop stumbles in on them. And you would think that once the cop stumbles in that the vampires would just attack him and suck his blood. I mean, that would be something that would be common sense to do for a vampire. You got a victim there, there's no one else around, no witnesses. Take him, suck his blood, and pass him around. But instead what they do is that they turn into bats. They turn into cartoon bats. Totally silly, cartoony kind of thing, hard to take serious. I mean, maybe that kind of thing was able to fly back then, no pun intended, but maybe people fell for that kind of stuff then, using cartoon animation for effects, but it's totally silly in this movie. It looks horrible, not even good cartoon animation. From that point, there's a scene where she's going to meet her boyfriend. On her way there, she walks through 42nd Street, and you get some really awesome shots of 42nd Street in the 70s, which looks really cool. You see all the marquees of all the X-rated films that were shown there, all the peep shows. It looks really cool. Any serious lover of grindhouse cinema would love to watch that kind of stuff. Eventually, she bumps into her old friend from the BSA meeting, the black vampire pimp, and pretty much he's running a brothel. It's like a prostitution thing where they use prostitutes to lure victims to go into this room, and they drain all of his blood, and then they sell his blood on the black market for vampires or something. So that's pretty much the whole operation there, but it's the pimp vampire is totally hilarious because he acts just like a drug dealer. Like he acts like he's selling drugs, but really it's blood for other vampires. So that's a fun little silly scene. She finally meets up at the dance club, which is called the Starship, I believe, and she meets up with Jimmy. But they do this whole show, and I mean, most of the dancing is really horrible, so it's just a silly scene. It's not like professional dancing in the movie, not by any means. After the whole dancing thing, they decide to go get stoned, and they start to smoke some pot. For the first time, she smokes pot. She turns into a bat. He thinks he's just hallucinating because it was some good pot that he was smoking. Dracula and his friend, the werewolf Theodore, end up going to New York. He tells Theodore to go find them. But there's this whole scene where you don't really know how Theodore, the werewolf, subdues Jimmy and Nocturna. It cuts to the scene of her in a bag. Jimmy's on the table passed out, and once again we get this rambling from Theodore and about this whole scheme that he's doing. He has all these syringes and stuff. He's pretty much going to drain all the blood of this guy. Nocturna wakes up, and this is really ridiculous shot of her ripping open the bag and making a vampire face. It's really silly. It looks like she's actually joking, like she wasn't even taking that part seriously. It just looks silly. But eventually Theodore goes back to Dracula and says, well, boss, I failed. I couldn't bring them back. So he goes to find them, and they end up finding them at a disco club again. He gets annoyed with all the disco dancing Dracula. He freezes the club with his magic Dracula vampire powers, I guess. He tries to kill or do some kind of magic power stuff to Jimmy, and I guess it fails. So Dracula's take Nocturna out of the club. Jimmy wakes up from being passed out. He sees Dracula taking Nocturna out, and he rips off the T from Starship, the sign outside the building. Rips off the T, and it's a cross. He scares Dracula away. He turns into an animated bat and flies away. Another little twist on the whole vampire theology is that in this movie, she realizes that the more she listens to music, the more mortal she becomes. So by this point in the movie, she becomes immortal. So at the very end of the movie, what happens is she tells Jimmy that what she wants to do with him is watch the sunrise. And he says, well, that's dangerous considering that you're a vampire. And that's a funny thing. Like, Jimmy is totally cool with her being a vampire. He's not, like, weirded out or shocked, or it's not like he says, oh, that can't be true. You're joking, right? Jimmy just takes it for granted. It's like, oh, you're a vampire? Okay. It's just a funny thing. After that, we get this last little silly scene of Dracula in a coffin with Jugula. They're about to have sex, and she's pretty much trying to convince him that, don't worry, it's like riding a bike. Once you do it, you never forget. A lot of scenes in the club of disco dancing. Not just these two, not just Jimmy and Nocturna, but other people in the club. But you would expect that with a disco vampire movie, so I don't know why too many people would complain about seeing a lot of disco dancing in the movie, when in fact it's a disco-themed movie. In fact, it's music from two big disco singers, and Gloria Gaynor, and the other one is Vicky Sue Robinson, two big disco singers from the 70s. Some speculate that the reason this was never re-released is because of the music in this movie. There's a lot of different music from different record labels in this, so to re-release the movie would be difficult because they'd have to clear all the songs, and you would need lots of money to do that, a lot of money to invest in clearing all the songs, so it's probably not worth clearing all the copyright issues to re-release this movie, and that's probably why it's never been re-released. Some people say that's not why, that there's some behind-the-scenes issues. A lot of people talk crap on the internet. I don't even know if that's true. Like, how would you know that? How do you know that's what the problem is? This is a really fun movie. It's poorly made, but it's fun because of the dialogue. It's fun to really get that retrospective aspect of the 70s from watching this movie. The picture quality, and I think all the prints of this movie suffer from poor picture quality. A lot of the movie has that blue tint. Whenever someone would record a projection onto a screen, like a movie's being projected and they record it with a camera, a lot of the times it has that blue tint. That's what it feels like. It just feels like this movie wasn't processed correctly to be put on VHS. So the picture quality is really bad. I would love to see this movie in a nice, clean, crisp print, because the picture, as I said, is pretty bad. The colors are pretty bad. The sound sounds okay. It's not so bad. That's pretty much it with Nocturna. It's just a really fun, cheesy, very dated movie from the 70s with all the disco music and all that stuff with the dialogue, and it's a totally fun movie, cult movie from the 70s, and it should be put on DVD, and I think a lot of people would end up buying it. That's pretty much it with Nocturna. It's a rare VHS. It's very hard to come by. I was lucky enough to find it for the price that I did, and I encourage other collectors to get it too. It's a very sought after VHS. So this has been Paul. Once again, look out for another review that I'm doing. I hope to do it very shortly, so that's it. See you later, guys.
Nocturna, daughter of darkness, hauntress of my dreams, your wind-blown hair, your witching eyes, your fragrant lips, your firm young breasts, your frenzied little behind. 90 pounds seconds of quivering flesh. A perfect portrait mistress. I'm too easily aroused. Cows have to wear brassieres when I go to the country. From nakedness to nudity. A loose woman. I'm too young to go steady, but I've always been interested in loose women. There is so much you can do with them. Give it to her, good Theodore. Smack in the entertainment center. Away! Filth! Unspeakable filth!